Okay, good morning, everyone. Let's get started with our presentation for today. My name is Jenna Anderson. I am the Support Services Manager for the Kendallville Public Library, and I'm also a member of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Committee. I will be the host and question moderator for today's session, which is Welcoming Spaces for LGBTQ+, presented by Jane Walters of the Indianapolis Public Library. Just a couple of announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which is found on the website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. This session is about an hour, so you will receive one LEU for this presentation. If you are watching an archived recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description under YouTube. You can also find those instructions on the ISL's continuing education site under LEU policies. If you did miss it and you are viewing this live, I will put a link in the chat box toward the end of the presentation so you can complete that form to receive your LEUs. Let's get started. Jane Walters is an accomplished librarian, and within months of gaining her MLS, she was promoted from a public library assistant to branch manager of the West Indianapolis branch of the Indianapolis Public Library. She has worked in libraries for over 12 years. Her writing has been featured in Library Journal, and Jane is proudly the first openly transgender manager in IndiePL's history. She is a member of the IndiePL Equity Council and a founding member of the LGBTQ+ committee for the Indianapolis Public Library. She has spoken at several conferences on LGBTQ+ issues and can be seen in a number of Indiana State Library webinars. Her passions include LGBTQIA+ representation in juvenile literature, making sure libraries are accessible and equitable for the community, and making libraries a safe and welcoming environment. So Jane, the presentation is yours.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for being up so early. I know it is early, and I hope everybody has their coffee. Just waiting on my computer to we just went through this. As she said, I am Jane Walters. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the branch manager of the West Indianapolis branch. And you don't need to hear me brag about myself, but these are my kitties, so yay. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and if you have any questions afterwards that don't particularly get answered today, you can reach out on any of those, or you can also email me. So let's get started with some simple rules. I like to have these at the start. I want to make sure that we are respectful. Everybody is respectful. And it's important to remember that you don't know what you don't know. So if you're here because you know some of this stuff, great. If you're here because you don't know some of this stuff, welcome. That's also great. And we make mistakes, and you don't know what you don't know until you learn that. And it's great to ask those questions. Make sure you take care of yourself. I will have some things that I'll talk about in here that might be a little hard to hear. It's a little rougher for some that might actually experience some of these things that I'll be talking about. So it's perfectly fine if you need to step away for a bit. Please take care of yourself. You have the right to pass at any time. I might ask questions and things like that, but please go ahead and feel free to pass at any time if you don't want to answer things. Make space, take space. These are general rules. Normally this is an in-person kind of thing, so there's a lot more interaction live, but I always feel that this is a very important one to have regardless anytime, is to make space and take space. So make space for others to be able to speak, and take that space when you actually have something to ask that is important to you. It's important to step up and ask those things. And then the Vegas rule. What is said in here stays here. So if you know somebody that is asking questions, try and remember that it stays here, because we are creating a safe space here for people to discuss things that they might not know, that they have questions about, and we don't want that. we know that the library community is a very small one. A lot of people know people, and we want to make sure that we create that safe space here for folks to be able to share openly and not have to worry about it coming back to bite them later on. So what is the point of this particular presentation? It's on creating those welcoming spaces for our patrons. And I always say that I always tried to be who I needed to be when I was younger. Um, and I find that that's really helpful for a lot of our younger patrons. And if you're, dealing with coworkers or you're dealing with employees, if you treat them well, they will stay. There's people don't leave because of bad jobs. They leave because of bad environments. Tends to be the actual reason. It's that environment that is created. So let's try and create those spaces, and hopefully this will help you to be able to do that. So we're going to start off with some of the bad news first, just because I want to get it out of the way, and I know it's a little early for bad news. But these are some statistics on frequently heard anti-LGBTQ remarks at school. So these are some of the reasons why this stuff is important. Saying things like "that's so gay," remarks about gender expression, other homophobic remarks. You can see that it's pretty high, and they don't just hear it at school. They hear it within their families as well. 67% of LGBTQ youth hear their families make negative comments about LGBTQ people. 78% of youth are not out to their parents as LGBTQ because they hear their families make negative comments about LGBTQ people. I have had so many kiddos come in and talk to me, and they're out to me, but they're not out to their family at all. And there's one that came in not that long ago. She came up to me and she was talking to me about a breakup she had with her girlfriend at school. And none of this stuff is something that she can share at home because they would kick her out. They flat out would. The majority of the homeless youth that are out there because they are LGBTQ. And I told her at one point, I'm like, well, maybe when you're older and you move out, you'll be able to share that part of yourself with your family. And she's like, no, I never will. I know how they are. And this girl's 14. She's got a long ways to go living in this environment. So we want to try and make those spaces available for people that they can have it with us. And they're not just hearing about it from kids or family, they're hearing about it from teachers and staff as well. So it's like we need to hold others accountable. If you hear somebody saying something, call them out about it because it's very hurtful. And these kids, they need these spaces. They really do. And it impacts them in some very serious ways. Suicide attempts for teens who identify as transgender female are reported. Can anybody want to guess in the chat what percentage you think that is? Just go ahead and throw some numbers out there. I'm seeing it kind of all over the place. A lot of 50%ers. It is 30%. Luckily, it's not as high as the 75, but these are only the ones that have reported it. And then teens who identify as transgender male, they're reported at a rate of 51%, much higher. So they are the ones that are in that 50% range. So it's huge. This is a big impact. And it's important to know that these are things that they're surrounded with. Yes, parents can change over time, teachers can change and learn over time, but these are some pretty long-lasting impacts. And we do want to try and encourage them to like try and be hopeful for changes in attitude. But in the meantime, they can at least have us. Just waiting for everything. And it's not just the kids. It's happening with adults as well. There's non-discrimination statutes, and most states do not explicitly apply or include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected characteristics. So 25% of LGBT people report experiences of discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity, half of whom said it negatively impacted their work environment. These are some numbers that I pulled up from the LGBT demographic data interactive, and this is a really great. I highly recommend if you just Google LGBT demographic data interactive, you can find so much information on different states, on the country as a whole. I focused on Indiana, obviously, for today's session, and the percentage, the LGBT percentage of the population for Indiana itself is 4.5%. Now, when you think about it, it's like, it's kind of hard to put those in actual numbers. So I did the math, and I hate math, so that's how much I care about this. So 4.5% of the United States report as being LGBT. And again, these are always self-identified and folks that actually report it. And there's a lot of people out there that they don't report it. They're still closeted. They don't even want to tell it in a survey or anything like that. That is 14.769 million people in the United States. And that's 303,000 in Indiana alone. And so of those, the ones that report experiencing discrimination, that's 76,000 people. That's a lot of people. And some of those people might be people you work with or people that you serve, either in the library or they, you never know. That's the thing, is that you just don't know, because not everybody is out and not everybody feels comfortable. And that's how we can kind of create those environments where they can be comfortable, and they can be like, even if they're not going to be out to anybody else, they can be out to you. So, okay, that was a lot. So deep breath. Here's a kitty cuddling a hedgehog and a puppy with a chicken, because that was a lot. It's a lot. There's a lot of negative, but the good news is you're here, and we're going to talk about some signs, and some of those are big signs that you can do to like help create those environments. It might be a reading section specifically for it, and it doesn't have to be just June. It doesn't have to be Pride Month to have an LGBTQ section. It doesn't have to be Pride Month to have an LGBTQ display, or to have those books incorporated just in the rest of your displays. If you're doing story times, you can incorporate them into that. If you're doing ones on families, there's lots of ways you can incorporate it into that. There's also silly books that don't have to do with family, but still have topics that you can tie in and have that representation there, so that it doesn't seem abnormal. And that's not just good for the kiddos that are living it. It's good for the ones that aren't living it, because then they can see that this is just normal. There's nothing weird about this. The fact that they have two moms, or that they have two dads, or that sort of thing. It's no different than when we do ones about single families, or those kids being raised by their grandparents or their auntie or their uncle, instead of their actual like birth parents. You can incorporate those sorts of books into those story times, and that can be a pretty big sign to let them know that, hey, this is somebody I can talk to. This is a safe place for me. These are some other ones. This is just a whole collection of things that I've come across. One of which is you'll see that it's got IUPUI, Mahasana Amin, she's an instructor. Well, she's doing virtual. That is her background behind her when she's doing her talks and things like that, when she's doing virtual. That way that when people tune in, it's not a rainbow necessarily, but it's the rainbow. Like, come on. And Maggie Ward, who's the manager for outreach, right on her door, she's got a big pride sticker. You can have a school library that says that it's a safe space and that you're an ally. There's smaller stickers that you can get, window decals for that. You can just create your own, like the Arlington, Virginia branch that has the diverse inclusive one on their window. So there's all sorts of really, really big ways that you can go about showing that. And then there's smaller ones. There's smaller signs. And the thing about small signs, people are like, well, what's a small, like, I don't understand what you mean by a small sign. When you are part of the LGBTQ community, you notice the rainbows, you notice the pins, you notice the flags, you notice all of those things, because for a lot of us, that is like a neon sign in the middle of the darkness in the desert. And your eye just picks up on it immediately. And it can be super small or it can be super big, but when it's small, you do pick up on it and other people don't. So if there's that concern of, well, I don't want to have like, I'm in a really conservative area, so I can't necessarily have like a huge, big, like, hey, look, we love queer people, come hang out kind of thing, signs. You can do it in those smaller ways that just kind of give that little like, hey, I'm here and I'm here for you, whether it's as an ally or as family. And so some of those small signs are buttons. And there's a variety of different ways you can do it with buttons. It can be a wristband. It can be the little, that one with the tumbler with the little tiny pride ribbon on it. That is super small and that just sits at my desk. And so even when I'm not wearing my lanyard, that honestly at this point, it's not so much a small sign anymore. This is a pretty big sign at this point because of how many I have on here. But when I don't have that on and I just have the tumbler and that little ribbon there, I have had people come up and be like, I like your ribbon. And it's not super noticeable when you think about like what a reference desk or a circulation desk looks like and all the stuff that's on there. It's not super noticeable to anybody that's just kind of glancing. But when you are part of the community and you are that closeted teen or that closeted adult, that is like, I can go talk to this person. I can, and I've had patrons, adults, kids, both come up to me when I've had that out and just like pass by other people. And it's not to necessarily ask me about, where can I find LGBTQ books? Where can I find the material? Where can I find support groups and things like that? I do get those questions because they know they can ask me, but they also sometimes just come up and they talk, and not about anything like that, but just because they know that this is somebody I can talk to and this is somebody I can trust. This is somebody I can be myself around, and that is so important. Another one that's pretty huge for being such a little sign is just having your pronouns in your signature. You can have it right after your name. You can have it at the bottom of it. There's all sorts of different ways that you can do it. Some libraries, they let you have it on your name badge, which I think is really cool. But just having them, whether you're transgender or not, just having those pronouns there, it's huge because it shows that you recognize how important they are. And a lot of people, they're like, well, how important? It's not really that important. You know, pronouns aren't really that important, are they? They're really damn important. And honestly, they're important to everybody if you really think about it. Because I mean, if you walked into like one of the gyms and you walk up to the guy that's going like, bruh, kind of thing, and you start calling him by female pronouns and you keep at it, he's gonna kick your butt because they're really important to him. Whether he thinks that they're important to anybody else, they're really important to him. So they're important to everybody. Like, let's be honest here. They are. And when you are transgender and you get misgendered, it's a gut punch. Like, it will ruin your day. It can ruin your week. It's huge. And I think that I wasn't going to get into all this, but I'm going to get into all this. I think it's important to remember though that like if you mess up and it's a legit mistake, don't make a big deal out of it. Like that makes it worse. Just be like, I'm sorry, and move on. Be like, I'm sorry, I meant, and then whatever it is. And you know, and if you're not sure, use they, them. Nobody's going to get upset by using they, them. And people that are constantly talking about, well, they, them aren't really pronouns. Yes, they are. Because if you think about it, if somebody leaves a phone in the library, like, oh, somebody left their phone in the library. I'm going to put their phone in the safe. If they come back for it, because we don't know the pronouns to use, because we don't know whether they're male, whether they're female, whether they identify as male or female, or whether they identify as both or neither or any of that. We don't know. And so we're using those gender neutral pronouns. They work for everybody regardless of if they actually identify by a specific gender or not. So, okay, let me push the soapbox away for just a minute. So these are some what to do's and what not to do's, because you might have somebody that comes out to you as a patron, as a coworker, and there's some things that you can do that will mess things up, and there's some things that you can do that will be like just perfect and exactly what they need. So the do's: listen. That is key. Listen. Don't jump in. Don't start telling an anecdote about like your gay uncle or something like that, or you had this aunt who had a roommate and that like, oh, it was her roommate for like 40 years or whatever like that. No, just listen. This is their story and it's already hard enough for them without you interrupting them. So be present when you're listening. Be an active listener and actually listen. And you need to remain present throughout the whole thing. Don't check your phone. Don't you like if something comes up, just be like, hold on a second. We're gonna come back to this. Take care of it, come back, and like, okay, sorry about that, whatever. But if you can avoid any of those sorts of distractions, do so, because it takes a lot of nerve to do that initial step, because you have no idea how that person's going to react. You don't know how they're going to respond at all. And so if you disrupt that, it can really throw them off and they can shut down and like not want to continue, sort of thing. And then ask how you can support them. Like, what can I do? If it's a coworker, you'd be like, do you want to talk to HR? You know, you want me to be there with you? And if you're the manager, you can be like, do you want me to tell the staff? Do you want to tell the staff? Do we want to wait on, like, just find out, kind of like, let them lead. But most importantly, go with what they're wanting. Don't try to push them in any one direction or another. And have their back. That is so big on so many levels, because there's going to be, unfortunately, there are jerks out there. And when that person's not around, people might say stuff. Or when that person is around, they might say stuff. Other patrons might say things, other coworkers might say things, stuff like that. Support them. Like, you would not let somebody talk bad about your friend. Don't let somebody talk bad about this person who has like put their trust in you with this very important aspect of themselves. And do your research. That don't have them do the emotional labor of like teaching you about like what, like, oh, you're pansexual, what does that like. No, you look at, there's plenty of information out there on the different genders, the different gender identities, the different sexualities, all of those. There's plenty of information out there now. Do your own research. And that will help you to be able to support them and to have their back when other people are asking questions. And some of them might be like really offensive questions. Especially if it's somebody transgender. It's like when somebody comes out as transgender, all of a sudden everybody's interested in their genitals. And it's like, you don't go around asking anybody else about their genitals. Why all of a sudden are you interested in theirs? So do your research. And that includes the library policies. Like, what is the policy for your branch or your system or your school or any of those? Because there might not be very good policies in there. Not too many libraries actually have protection policies for folks that are transgender, for example. The Indianapolis Public Library System, which has been around for a very, very long time, until about 6 years ago, they did not have any transgender protection policies for supporting folks for being able to use the bathroom, for discrimination from patrons, from staff, from manager, supervisors and things like that. None of that was in there. So do your research. And honestly, if they're not there and you notice they're not there, say something. And you don't have to say something about, well, Susie or Dave or Alec, they're this or that or whatever. And so you need this policy. Just be like, hey, I noticed that we don't have a policy that helps protect, folks. So I think we should have that way, that if we have anybody that identifies this way or that way, they can feel, that the library has their back as well. Plus, then it also attracts future employees because we search. It's like, okay, what is their healthcare like? Do they have protection policies, or could I get fired just for coming out, kind of thing? Because that can happen, as you saw in the previous slide about just the discrimination and protection policies are not there. So you also need to acknowledge. You need to acknowledge that what they have said to you, and don't dismiss it. Sometimes a tricky part of that is understanding that for some people, it might shift, it might change some. I've known people that have come out as trans, and then as they are able to be themselves more, then they discover that they're more gender fluid, or that they're non-binary rather than like one gender or the other, kind of thing. So just recognize that it can be fluid. And that can be the same thing with sexuality as well, you know. So just don't dismiss that. I'm waiting for my computer. Okay, there we go. So what not to do? Don't freak out. That's huge. Don't freak out, because like they're already under enough stress as it is. They don't need you freaking out. They need you calm and to just listen and not freak out. Like none of the, no way, are you kidding? I didn't know that. That's so crazy. No, don't do that. They're not kidding. They're, I actually got a no way, are you kidding from somebody. And it was just like, oh my goodness, why would I kid about this? And don't assume. That's really, really important, because for everybody, it can be a little different. Especially if they're trans, that's for sure. Everybody transitions differently. Not everybody's going to do, like, not everybody has the money to do all the things that they might want to do. Not everybody might necessarily want to do all of the things that people associate with transitioning. You know, I know people that they're like, I'm trans, and that's it. They don't do medication. They don't do anything like that. They don't care about like whether you get their pronouns right or not. They don't, well, they don't change their pronouns. Um, and then there are some that, you know, they do certain things, but they don't do all the things. And so everybody is different. Everybody's journey is different. And that's the case for whether, you know, they're bisexual or whether they're demi, or whether, you know, whether they're gay or lesbian or pansexual or, you know, asexual or anything like that. Is assuming is just don't. um, and don't get in their business. Like I said, it's like, look, you don't need to know who they're sleeping with, if they're going to have surgeries, if, you know, just like, you don't need to get into all that. If they want to share that, that's one thing, but don't go poking. Don't go poking around. That's entirely up to them, whether they, how much they want to share. They're already sharing this much about themselves. So just let them kind of control how much they're willing to share on that. And this is huge. Don't out them to others. Just because they've come out to you doesn't mean they're out to everybody. Some people, they need to take their time. Some people, they need to pick and choose who they're going to come out to. You might be the only one that they come out to. And that can sometimes be a little tricky to navigate, for sure. But it also says a lot too about how much they trust you and they admire you or they look up to you. But they're entrusting you with this very important part of themselves. And one of the things that you can do is you can ask them, who are you out to? You know, this is going into that, asking how you can support them. Because you might have, maybe you have an employee, a page, a volunteer, anything like that that comes out to you, and it could be like, okay, do you want to tell the rest of the staff? Do you want to tell other people? That kind of thing. Or are we going to wait? But that is, again, it's letting them sort of direct how things go, and then just supporting them and having their back on that. Because you don't want to be like sending out an email blast like, okay, so and so, their pronouns are they, them, and kind of thing is just like, no, let them kind of guide that. And because that there's no, it's dangerous for one thing, because there are plenty of times in which people get assaulted basically based on the fact that they find out that the person that they're looking at is not what they assumed. And so that tends to be one of the primary reasons a lot of times that transgender women get assaulted, because it's like in the person that's doing the assaulting, it's like, that's a dude dressed as a woman, and so that offends my masculinity or what I was thinking, or I was attracted to them, and that makes me feel weird now, so now I'm going to go kick their ass. And there was, not that long ago actually, a patron who used to come into the library fairly regularly. They were just out and about, and some people found out that they were trans, and they she didn't live through the experience, I'll just say that. So it's extremely important. And that includes family members. Like I mentioned, the young lady who came in and has come out to me. Like, I'm not going to say anything to her folks when they come in. That's between us. She trusted me with that. I'm not going to say anything to their family. And if this is somebody that's even related to you, you're not going to tell the rest of the family. That's up to them. So, and don't be afraid. A lot of people, this kind of jumps back to freaking out. For some reason, they're afraid. It's like, I don't know what this is going to mean. I don't know what this is going to do. It brings up for some people, it brings up some interesting feelings. And like I've known of people that, like, when they came out, then like some of the people they were working with were afraid that maybe they were attracted to them, and it's like, no, that's like not why they came out. They didn't come out so that like they could then date you, kind of thing. It's like, it has nothing to do with that. So like, cool your jets, quit thinking so high of yourself. Just because they are attracted to other men doesn't mean they're attracted to all men or you. So yeah, so just, it's okay, and you'll get it. It'll be fine. And if anybody should be afraid, it's the person that's doing the coming out. I thought that this was really neat. This is an ally pledge, which I came across, and it talks a lot about like some of the things to do. These are definitely ones that could go on that what to do list, and that's being conscious of your privilege, providing that support and availability and understanding, and debunking stereotypes. When you hear them, just be like, no, nope, that's not true. Here's why, that sort of thing, because there's so many different stereotypes out there. Granted, some people kind of live up to the stereotypes, but there are definitely a lot of stereotypes that just are not true at all. Speak up against marginalized groups and promote social justice. And I mean, honestly, this could go not just towards the queer community. This could go towards BIPOC folks as well. People that, need accessibility of one sort or another. So there's all sorts of different marginalized groups out there, plenty of us to go around that need some support and promotion of social justice for them. Recognize that you don't have all the answers and that you're there to listen. And that's one of the things too that a lot of people seem to forget, is that there's one thing of being there, saying you're there to listen, and then when they start to talk, then start debating or defending. So if somebody says like, hey, that was offensive, listen. Don't defend the action. Listen, why was it offensive? And then that way you can change the behavior. They're not telling you it to necessarily call you out or put you on the spot or make you feel bad. If they're taking the time to tell you about it, it's because they're trying to help educate you so that you can change and you can be a better ally. And a lot of people, they get defensive. And that's not the point. You're not being an ally then. And then proudly self-identify as an ally in your different environments, so like you don't just be the ally when they're around. A lot of this speaking up and things like that is going to need to happen when they're not around. It's when you might be at the table and looking around and going, okay, why don't we have anybody that's LGBTQ involved in this conversation? Why don't we have some of that? There's a lot of talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it needs to be more than just like one person. And honestly, if you're going to be talking about stuff in regards to that, really, if you're not part of that marginalized group, you shouldn't be the one doing the talking. You should be pulling them in so they can be doing the talking. And that's it. So I think I left enough time for some questions. Here's my information if you need to get a hold of me again. And there's my kitties again, of course. That's Pyewacket, the black one, and Desolé, who is never sorry.
Thank you, Jane. We have about 15 minutes or so for questions. We have had a couple come in.
Okay.
And there has been some discussion about this one. How do you feel, Kelsey asked, how do you feel about LGBTQ labels on books?
No. I feel very strongly about that because, again, for example, the girl that came in that can't come out to her family, I was able to give her a book that did have queer material in it, but it did not look like it was part of LGBTQ. The cover wasn't designed that way. It didn't have like rainbows and unicorns. It didn't do any of that. It was just very nondescript, because the thing is that like the kids get picked on enough. They don't need, like I was talking about, these signs for them. If a kid is carrying around one, all of a sudden everybody suddenly sees that. And then it attracts the predators, to the bullies and everything else. So no, by far no. There's actually author Sandra Mitchell. She purposely talked to the publisher about her anthology she did with a whole bunch of queer authors called All Out. It's all queer material, all queer authors, like even her editor and the public, like it was like her manager and the editor were both queer at the time. Well, I say at the time, they're still queer, but she has a different editor now. She made sure that like that book did not look it. That way any kid could be walking around with it, and it's not like, look, I'm gay. So.
Thank you. Heather also was interested in an example of protection policies at the library. So is that something that if people are interested in knowing like what NDPL's policy is, they can get in
Yes.
touch with you?
Yeah, totally. I can just copy and paste right out of our policy manual and send it to them because the wording was fantastic. I helped a little bit behind the scenes because I wasn't out yet. And it was like, I don't want to like come out until there is actually something. But yeah, I can totally send that to anybody that's wanting it. And so they can just shoot me an email and just put in there like trans policy for the subject. That way I know what I'm looking at and it's not just spam.
Thank you. I have put the link for the LEU form in the chat. So as we're finishing up here, if you want to go ahead and grab that, you can do that. If anybody has any other questions, you guys can feel free to unmute and ask those at this time.
Oh, and yes, I do see, yes, they did publish a sequel called Out Now, Here We Go Again. And there's going to be a third one coming out called Out There. And it's supposed to be like futuristic stuff. So. And again, like I said, if there's any questions that like you don't feel comfortable asking here, you can always email me and happy to answer them one-on-one that way. So. Yeah,
Hi, it's
glad
Lisa
everybody-
again. So let me know,
Hi.
can we stop the recording now?
I think so. We seem to
Okay.
be done with most of the
I
questions.
think
right
so.
now.
I don't see any other questions. So.
All righty.